Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Hi, Fahrusha. This is
Hey,
Kate
Kate.
Valentine, and we're very, very happy to have an old friend on as our guest today, Kathleen Marden, a very well-known person in the ufology field, in the field of abductions, in the field of, more interestingly, abduction research. I think Kathleen was one of, if not the only person, along with Denise Stoner, to actually try to quantify some details of abduction. So that was very interesting. But certainly I think the way, and I think Kathleen will agree with me, the way she got started in all this is she happens to be the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. Is that correct, Kathleen?
That is correct.
Yeah, you really had some firsthand experience. That was great.
Nice to speak with you again, Kathleen. We met a couple of times in the past. First time at Kate Valentine's Atlantic Coast UFO convention in Atlantic City at the cocktail party. We had a lovely conversation. And because of our show not being totally involved with UFOs, because our show leans heavily on areas of consciousness and parapsychology and remote viewing and other things, there may be people out in our listening audience who do not know the Betty and Barney Hill saga that you were a part of as a teenager. And I wonder, without going into every detail, perhaps you can give these people a little heads up about the date and kind of the overview of what happened.
I'd be happy to. The date was September 19, 1961. My aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill, were returning to their home in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, from a vacation to Niagara Falls. They went to Toronto, then to Montreal, and were driving home during the night when they had a close encounter with a UFO. It was so close that it actually hovered 100 feet approximately above their vehicle. My uncle stopped the car, got out. The craft shifted to a field, followed it into the field. He observed individuals on the craft that he immediately stated were somehow not human. They frightened him greatly. He ran back to the vehicle, was speeding down the road because he had the impression that if he didn't get out of there, he was going to be captured. And as he's driving down the road very rapidly, he and my aunt hear a series of code-like buzzing sounds striking the trunk of the car. They then feel a tingling sensation pass through their bodies. The car is vibrating. And the next thing they know, they're 35 miles down the road. They have very little memory of what happened in the interim. They remembered a roadblock somewhere along the way, a fiery orb, and that was about it. They went home and they discovered that there was physical evidence that they could not explain. My aunt's dress was torn in several places. The tops of my uncle's best dress shoes were so deeply scraped he had to buy new shoes. Their watches had permanently stopped, and there was a magnetic field around the trunk of the car and shiny spots where they heard those buzzing sounds. They knew that something unusual had happened. They didn't know exactly what, except for the sighting. They reported it to Pease Air Force Base. It was very distressing to my uncle, who had actually observed the non-humans. And this caused so much distress that he was referred to Dr. Benjamin Simon in Boston, Massachusetts. And he and my aunt had separate hypnosis sessions with Dr. Simon for a period of 6 months. And he imposed amnesia at the end of each session. And they came out with the same story of alien abduction. Their case was the first in the United States. We were not aware of this before this occurred.
Mm-hmm. One question that I have, and I think this would be of interest to many of our listeners who don't know the story, can you give a description of said non-human entities?
I can. My uncle said that they had large heads, larger in proportion to their bodies than humans. They were hairless. Their extremities he described as being spindly. They were smaller than the average human, and they spoke telepathically.
And that sort of set the scene. And a lot of people say, well, they were just describing what a lot of other people had happened to a lot of other people. But as you said, they were the first. And they actually made Life a magazine, I believe. Look, okay. And, they became quite well known at the time. And there had been a movie made back then. But then I think speaking with you, you said there was going to be a remake of that movie?
It's not a remake of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to be a movie on the book, Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO.
That was the one you co-authored with Stanton Friedman.
That I co-authored with Stanton T. Friedman.
Yes.
The movie has been made on the first book that was written by John G. Fuller back in 1966. Stanton Friedman and I did a case study. It started out as a biography, actually, and I was writing the details of my aunt and uncle's lives after both of them had passed away. But I discovered that there was so much fascinating information in their files that had never been reported to the public.
Really?
That I wrote about this in my book. And this book is the book that has been optioned for a movie.
That's wonderful.
Yes, it is, by Bryce Zabel,
yes.
Jackie Zabel, and by Gotham principal producers. They produced Maze Runner and the Scorch Trials.
Wow.
They're teaming up with Bryce to work on this movie, and it's going to be a lot different from the first. There's still a copyright on the first movie. This movie is going to focus more on the lives of Betty and Barney Hill, civil rights leaders. They were an interracial couple. She was a social worker. They were both very committed to the civil rights movement and to community affairs, prominent in the community. They never wanted this story to get out to the public in the way that it did. And so it would be more of a movie about their lives and the impact that this had on their lives and how it changed, in a way, the direction of their lives.
And your life as well, clearly.
Oh, clearly, yes, it certainly did.
Do you want to repeat the name of your book? I am the owner of that book, and I highly recommend it to our listeners. And if you wanted to repeat the name of that book and how people could get a copy of the book, either in an e-form or a hardback form or a softback form, maybe you could give us the information right now.
Sure. The book is Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience by Kathleen Marden and Stanton Friedman. And Marden is M-A-R-D-E-N. A lot of people think it's Martin, but it's not. And the book is available in Barnes & Noble, or you can order it online through Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Autographed copies are available at my website, which is Kathleen, with a K, Marden, MARDEN.com. And you can purchase those using PayPal on my website.
Great.
One of the interesting things that you brought out about your aunt and uncle is that they were actually at an inaugural ball, which is an indication of how well thought of they were in the community.
Absolutely. They campaigned for Lyndon Johnson, and Johnson was elected. My uncle was a delegate. And I also worked on that campaign as a teenager. And I, too, received an invitation
Cool.
to attend Lyndon Johnson's inauguration. So Betty and Barney and I attended the inauguration. And,
Wow.
oh,
Yeah.
what a fantastic experience.
Yeah.
I hope you
for
have
a
pictures.
You know, I must have pictures somewhere. I do have one large photograph of the entire New Hampshire group,
Yeah.
which I cherish.
That must have been such a thrill, really, at that age especially.
Yes.
So, you know, I know that your aunt continued to be involved in the UFO area after your uncle unfortunately passed on, and you also have continued as a researcher and with MUFON, and you won a wonderful prize back in 2014, am I right? Or 2012 from MUFON. You won the Ufologist of the Year award, did you?
Yes. Yes, so I believe it was 2012 that
Okay.
I won that award. That was a very special moment in my life.
Yes, as it must be.
Well, MUFON is the Mutual UFO Network, and it's probably one of the oldest and best-known organizations. There have been others, but MUFON seems to survive and continue on. And you've been very active in that, I know. Actually, now you're even more active in their experiencer field, I believe.
Yes, I am. I've been a member of MUFON since 1991. So here we are at
Wow.
25 years.
Yeah.
And you can see by my long-time membership that I think that it's a very good organization, primarily because in its investigations of events, it attempts to follow scientific protocols. We tend to be as objective as possible and to collect physical evidence, to eyewitness testimony, and to analyze that evidence to come up with an impression of what actually occurred. So that has kept my interest. Also, MUFON publishes a monthly magazine, and the magazine contains very interesting articles. It's now available online or in hard copy as well. It's an organization that is funded by its members. So we pay an annual fee for the magazine, for the membership, and that helps to fund the organization. And we have a yearly symposium, and that symposium is going to be held in Orlando in August of this year. So the website for MUFON is just www.mufon.com. My current role with MUFON is as its Director of Experiencer Research. We used to use the name abduction, but I received so many comments that it was not politically correct anymore.
Is that what changed it? Oh.
Yes, we have moved to experiencer. People said, well, abduction implies a negative experience. And
well, most of them have been.
Yes, and most of the ones that MUFON receives are negative experiences. But we have many, many people now who are stating that their experiences are highly positive and spiritual and leading to the ascension process. And it's primarily those people who are very, very vocal and do not like the word abduction, even though, that's what we deal with primarily.
I am an experiencer, and I know that from my point of view that the contact is horrifyingly frightening. I mean, in a kind of physiological way. It is just beyond terrifying. The outcome looking back in the long haul, the outcome is expanding of one's consciousness in a certain sense, that you can see more of what it means to be alive, or that we're not alone in the universe kind of knowledge that is imparted. And I'm not talking about any particular secrets imparted, but just the concept that there are other beings and that we may not be on the top of the food chain at all.
Well, that is absolutely correct. And I think everybody who has this type of experience comes to that realization. But it is extremely frightening for many, many people. People are traumatized by these events. And what we have done at MUFON is it's multifaceted. For one thing, we have designed specific protocols for investigation, where we are looking for any evidence that we can possibly collect from the experiencer for laboratory analysis. We have a second component to that, and that is support for experiencers, because so many people have difficulty with this. So MUFON's experiencer research team has an online questionnaire. It's 30 questions, and all it is an introduction to a member of the ERT. So if somebody wants to discuss confidentially what occurred to them, their concerns or anything else, we'll have a person on the other end who will listen without passing judgment, without being critical. And if the person who is seeking help is looking for a support group or looking for a hypnotist, we do what we can to help them by providing a list of individuals. Unfortunately, at this point, we have only 27 hypnotists in the entire United States on our list for referrals, and we're looking for more. And if anyone out there listening is a certified hypnotherapist and is either licensed or certified and has malpractice insurance and experience in working with experiencers, we would appreciate it if you would get in touch with me. My email address is on my website, Kathleen-Marden.com. We also have a short list of support groups. We definitely need more of those, but I and several other researchers are working on this problem because people need support. Too often, experiencers have not been able to talk to anyone without ridicule, without the possibility of losing their jobs, without the possibility of being sent to a psychiatrist. And it's time for that to end. It's time for the ridicule to end.
I think it's slowed down a bit, though, hasn't it? And I think you've been one of the main reasons it has.
The ridicule.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that people are becoming more accepting for the most part, and less are not bullying, let me put it that way, experiencers as much. And there has been a movement by experiencers to gain strength in this as well. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, a lot of people say, show me the evidence that this is real.
Right.
The way that we perceive this is it doesn't really matter. The individual believes that it is. Even if that person is experiencing mental health issues, don't they deserve respect? Are not we to respect our individuals, our citizens who have mental health problems?
Surely.
Absolutely. But I'll tell you, as far as show me the evidence, and this being a terrifying experience, kudos to your aunt who stood up to these beings that had abducted her and said, look, I need some proof that I've been here, and bullied one of the abductors into giving her something, but then whoever the head of abductor was took it back from her. But and having had the pleasure of meeting your aunt very briefly one time, I think she was quite the forceful character that could have talked these little creatures into giving her something. I always loved that story, that she stood up to him and said, hey, give me something to take home. That was great.
She was a very brave woman.
I would say so, really. Absolutely. Hats off. But you're following in her footsteps. So that again, the website was MUFON.com Experiencer Survey.
Wait a minute.
I was going to say that you've started on too. That's a new thing, right? The research project?
Yes, and that's what I wanted to speak of next, is the Experiencer Survey, which is 118 questions. And this is a survey to identify commonalities among experiencers. And we are trying to make this scientific because we're going to, by doing so, have several different phases of this study. And some of this will involve the work of Dr. Don Donderi, who is a retired psychology professor from McGill University. And he has a questionnaire that we will use as well with some of the experiencers who take part in this research project that we're working on right now. Right now we have 170 participants. I'd really love to have 1,000.
Yeah, that would be terrific. Did the professor himself ever have any experience?
Not that I'm aware of, but he has a long-term interest in this topic and has worked on other research projects.
Okay.
I understand that part of this research that Professor Donderi is involved with has to do with symbols that have been seen both by your aunt and uncle and also by other experiencers. I wondered how those symbols correlated, if they did at all, with those seen by the people who were enlisted in the armed services at Rendlesham.
It's my understanding that the symbols at Rendlesham were binary code. Is that correct?
I think some of it was interpreted that way.
Yes, I think the one gentleman who touched the craft felt that he had downloaded some binary signals, but I don't know that anything that was written or like embossed on the craft was binary.
I think they had like a triangle type thing with lettering inside it.
Well, that would be what I'm wondering about, whether that part correlates at all with the professor's work.
I'd have to take a look at that again. What we're seeing as symbols that seem to be repeated over and over again in such as the scientific study that Dr. Donderi did are lines and dots. Essentially, some of them are curved lines and some of them are straight lines, going in different directions. If you order my book, Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, Betty's sketch of those symbols is in the book. And her sketch was compared by Dr. Donderi to sketches that were done by the experiencers who took part in his academic study. And he said that there were many similarities between Betty's symbols and the symbols from the individuals in his study. And these symbols correlated, whereas control groups of graduate students who were just imagining what symbols might look like were nothing like the symbols drawn by the experiencers.
In MUFON, maybe I am not correct in this, and perhaps you could straighten me out. It seems to me that the focus is on nuts and bolts craft and on small grays, not to the total exclusion of other types that might be seen, but would that be a reasonably true statement?
Yes, I do think that is a reasonably true statement. MUFON uses instrumentation and is looking for physical evidence. So the primary focus of MUFON is upon the collection of evidence.
So the sort of ideas promulgated, if you will, by people like Jacques Vallée and the fellow who did the help me here, senior moment, fellow who lived in New York and did
Bud Hopkins?
No, did the story about the West Virginia bridge falling down. Mothman, yes.
What the hell was his name?
Yeah, exactly. On the tip of my tongue. But in any case, something more of a not space, but a little bit more, a little less physical, a little more paranormal presentation.
Well, I think Jacques Vallée felt that there was these beings were really like we almost created them out of our own mind, right?
Well, I'm not sure about that. He is going to be lecturing at the International UFO Congress conference in Phoenix, Arizona next month. I'm going to be out there, and I'm going to be really looking forward to hearing his lecture. But it seems like he was ahead of his time, because those of us who have done a lot of research on this realize that there are aspects to this phenomenon that cannot be explained by material scientists. The idea that they can be solid, but they seem to be able to fade in and out of existence. In other words, they can be translucent and simply disappear. Also, the same is reported of the extraterrestrial beings. Many people report that they see shadow beings as opposed to solid beings, and perhaps they fade in and out of existence. This is very, very difficult, very perplexing for material scientists.
Indeed.
And there are theoretical physicists who are working on this through the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. They are more on the side of theoretical physics.
Well, interestingly enough, if we look at the Travis Walton case, he saw a number of different types of beings in his abduction experience, in his experiencer experience. But definitely, if you're standing somewhere in the forest and you get whooped up, as Kate is want to say, that doesn't seem to be in any way volitional upon the experience's place. However, he did see more than one kind of being, and myself, as a person in the periphery of the remote viewing community and an experiencer, many people such as Ingo Swann have seen have had experiences with tall, blonde beings, sometimes called Nordics, sometimes called tall blonde types. And I know that there are people claim there are mantises and reptilians and so forth and so on. Now, this is just what people say, and I tend to take people to some extent at their word and give them the opportunity to speak their mind about it. So where would you fall in that area? Do you have any research, let's say, on the tall blonde alien types?
My research on different types is quantitative, and I have looked for percentages of individuals who have observed these various types, and also on whether or not these various types are working together, and if so, who they're working for. I also have done some research on the modus operandi, the personality traits of the different types of beings. So, yes, I have, and I have, in some of the cases that I've worked on, for example, the case of Denise Stoner, and also of Thomas and Matthew Reed, which are both mentioned and written about in my book with Denise Stoner, The Alien Abduction Files, which is also available on my website. We see that mantis-type beings working in concert with the Greys.
Have you come to any sort of conclusions at all? There's so much information there, but it's very frustrating. It doesn't seem to point in any bingo direction. Like you can just say, that's what it is. It seems like it's all over the map, almost as if it's done on purpose.
It could be, and that's the reason for my attempts at quantitative analysis of this, and the reason that MUFON is doing another study. Denise and I did a study in 2012, but we had only 45 questions and 75 participants in the study, including the control group. MUFON's study is going to be much more significant in terms of the number of participants and the number of questions, and hopefully, and we have people with MDs and PhDs working on this.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we will have some more information. If I had all of the answers, I probably would stop researching this, but I don't. And what is so fascinating is the search for the answers.
Yeah, how do you validate that somebody is an experiencer and a good participant in this? I'm sure you have criteria.
Yes, we do have criteria, and some of that is what experiencers have in common with the experiencers who participated in the first study. We also, as I said, look for evidence, but many people don't have evidence. Right. I can tell you, though, that in our first study we discovered that 88% of those who participated stated that they had conscious recall of their abduction experience.
Really?
That's pretty significant. 88%.
Because initially it was that some sort of an amnesia would be, brought to effect on these people. But that's 88%. That's
88% of part of it.
Okay, or at least they knew that something had happened, but they were a little unclear about some of the details.
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
yeah.
Fascinating.
Now, 67% said that they had observed an unconventional craft at less than 1,000 feet prior to their abduction.
Huh.
So those are pretty significant figures. It means that it wasn't sleep paralysis. Many of them were outside in their natural environment. They weren't sleeping. They weren't inside their home.
Yeah, I think that, possibly there are some episodes of sleep paralysis, but basically I think we could discount that entirely.
Yes, it's a pretty
poor
I think explanation for what is occurring.
Or that could be one type of experience, and that's fine, but what you're looking for is the type of experience that you can actually quantify with people remembering it and having a craft involved. I mean, there may be more than one type of experience, but I'm with you. I'd like to be able to actually quantify some of these results. What was the overall characteristic on this? Did they experience fear, or I know Fahrusha has said that there was some sort of an enlightenment type experience, but how did this impinge on their daily life?
The majority of individuals who took part in our study stated that they were fearful, that they were scared to death initially. But after the experience, they were also very, very curious.
Okay.
I asked if they could end this experience, would they? And that wasn't on the first questionnaire, but I have been asking people this. It's a question on the second questionnaire that we're trying to quantify. But it seems that many individuals are stating that they would choose to continue because of their curiosity, because they're looking for answers to their questions.
Kathleen, I would remind you of your co-writer's famous statement that humans are angry apes with guns. And it's one of my favorite things that Stanton Friedman ever said. And I think that a wonderful way to subdue angry apes with guns without killing them or locking them up is to use the natural biological state of sleep paralysis to keep humans from reacting. So if you are an alien or a higher intelligence and you are aware that all of the larger mammals on Earth experience biologically, they naturally experience sleep paralysis so that they don't jump out the window when they dream, that you as the higher intelligence could use this state of sleep paralysis to keep the human from acting violently or trying to get away and so forth.
Yes, absolutely. And that apparently is what happened to my Uncle Barney and my Aunt Betty and has continued to occur, even when the individual is wide awake and standing in a field. Historically, we see that they have been paralyzed. And even though they can remember part of the experience, they usually develop amnesia for part of it as well.
No, I was just saying that there actually was an experience. It wasn't only sleep paralysis, which it's been tried to explain away by some of these. But so anyway, just to get back to your one book, Alien Abduction Files, that you did with Denise Stoner, that's pretty fascinating stuff. And you indicated that you may have come to a dead end, though, after all that research, or are you still going to soldier on?
There are times where I feel terribly frustrated with the research because the trends within the field and the direction that it's going in. I'm going to continue to soldier on.
Good.
I am doing this research project. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm seeing trends toward more involvement with the media as opposed to scientists. And I think my greatest frustration is that so many of the great scientific minds who had worked in this field earlier, people with doctorates in their chosen field, for example, such as Dr. James Harder, such as Dr. Alan Hynek, and Dr. James McDonald, they have passed away, and they're not being replaced by younger people who have a scientific interest in this. And that is what disturbs me about the current trend, is that the move away from science, as I'm perceiving it, toward sensationalism in the media and very little concern about the veracity of the claim. Sometimes the media would like to focus upon the kookiest story that they can find, or the most eccentric experiencer that they can find because it plays well in the media. Your average family sitting at home watching TV likes to see that sort of thing, but it removes credibility from the subject matter. And a person like myself who is interested in the science of all of this can become very frustrated with it.
The internet with CGI effects has also muddied the waters greatly, I think.
Yes, that is definitely true.
Anybody with a little bit of knowledge of Photoshop and a picture of the night sky can create some form of movie or video purportedly depicting something alien or paranormal, and it's just an effect that's being done through computer-generated effects.
Yes, that's very true, and that's more reason for an organization like the Mutual UFO Network to continue soldiering on with what it's been doing for so many years, because they are an organization that focuses upon the science.
Would you say that in recent years, like say the past 7 or 8 years certainly, that there has been a paucity of large-scale sightings? In other words, by groups rather than individuals?
There has been, as far as we know, the large ones that I know of took place a while back. That's the Phoenix Lights, which is a very compelling story, where Fife Simonton, the governor of Arizona, has come out 10 years after the event and stated that it was real, and more recently on television has stated that the military was aware of it. He was on the phone with them, and that it was a real event. It was not military flares in that time frame. So that was very important. Of course, we had the O'Hare Airport event, which was again covered up, but then in the analysis of the weather pattern that day, we found that the hole in the cloud could not have been a naturally occurring punch hole cloud.
Right.
And there were so many credible witnesses to that UFO. And then, of course, the Stevensville, Texas sighting as well. Very important. We haven't had another major event in recent years like that, but we do have reports of UFOs hovering low over individuals' vehicles.
It always amazes me as to why that they should be covered up. There's got to be a sort of you almost suspect there's an agency not to be a conspiracy theory person, but like an agency within the government or within some government that is in charge of covering this up. It's just fascinating to me that it happens so fast and so effectively. That might be an area of interest of research, like who's doing this?
I'm very fascinated in that research, and I'm turning a lot of attention to that, because if the evidence is being covered up, if there is an obfuscation of what is actually going on, then how do you really get down to the nitty-gritty of it? When you go and look at the history of government involvement in this, you can see that there's been a lot of involvement. And that in 1953, the CIA funded Robertson panel met, the Durant report was written, and they had made the decision that it would be best to cover this up, to take the public's interest off this topic. Part of it was for national security over our Cold War with Russia, but part of it was because they, considering what had happened in the past with War of the Worlds and the broadcast of that
by
on
Orson
the radio,
Welles,
where
yes.
there was so much disruption, people who were frightened. They really had to consider the impact that it would have upon the population. And of course, we had Project Blue Book that lasted for many, many years until 1969. Sometimes they did a better job at it than others. Sometimes it was merely a cover-up. But there was also another agency that was receiving the most credible reports, the reports that could affect national security. And there's no reason to believe that agency closed along with Project Blue Book. It appears that it is probably still occurring, but the public is not involved, and the files are not available.
Looking at that from two different vantage points, we have the opinion of, like, say, the former MUFON head, James Carrion, that the government was interested merely because it provided, the UFO field provided a neat cover for testing military secret aircraft, and so it would draw Russian agents, if you will, or any of the Chinese agents, I suppose, as well, out of the woodwork to look at the UFOs, and that way somehow the government would catch them as apart from the normal UFO interested American. And then you can contrast that with two presidents in the late 20th century, both of whom have made definite statements that they saw things that they could not explain, that being Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. So you have things, you have to kind of come down in the middle with these things and not really know what's going on there with the national security, and what does the government know. I mean, we can look at what Colonel John Alexander, PhD, who was a former guest of ours on Shattered Reality here, and he seems to feel as though UFOs are real. They're not from any government on Earth, but no, the government doesn't know much about them. Or we can, go down another road, which is kind of the Richard. Help me.
Dolan.
Richard Dolan, breakaway society kind of way, that there is a whole subculture that knows about all these things and is keeping it from the rest of us, and that's also the David Icke direction. So it's hard as a thinking individual who tries to remain objective to a certain extent, but who has experienced certain things on one hand, and on the other hand, you want to be objective and say where does it come down in the middle?
Yes, and I would be suspicious of those who have radical thoughts about this, that it's all or nothing. There is evidence that the CIA did hoax some UFOs just for the public reaction. And there is definitely evidence that we do have military test vehicles that they were covering up. That does not mean that everything that has been observed is a military test vehicle. Many of them do not have the characteristics of anything that has been manufactured on Earth. And I'm going back historically here, back into the 50s, for example, where the craft could outfly and outmaneuver anything that we had on Earth.
Well, so, even with Frank Ficino, he had something along those lines too, and I think he presents some pretty solid evidence that there was a war going on in 1952. That was with the flybys over D.C., And he has some pretty interesting theories, too. The problem is these are all theories, until you capture one of these things, as you said, captured. I hope it works in reverse one day. It's, we're all just sort of, well, you're doing the best, I think, gathering as much data as you can. Otherwise, we're all just speculating.
That is true, and speculation can be fun, but it doesn't get us far in terms of reality.
Right. But I don't. They're very cagey, these things. I'll tell you, all these sightings, all these abductions, and something's happened somewhere to people. I don't think anyone can deny that. Whatever it is, something has happened. But boy, they're cagey. There's never been any solid evidence.
Well, I think that part of the reason is that as human beings, we are dealing with a certain range of intelligence. And I mean, I don't want to talk about IQs, but just using that as an example, we have human beings with IQs of 60, let us say, and then we have human beings with IQs of 200. But we could be dealing with an alien race or a non-physical race, shall we say, or an interdimensional race, that their intelligence far surpasses ours. And as a result of that, we're not able to cognitize what it is that's going on, regardless if we are considered on Earth like a smart person or, not the smartest crayon in the box.
Yeah, there's still got to be something out there. I mean, they exist in this world, even if temporarily. There's got to be something someplace. Someone's got to get a nut or a bolt sometime.
Sorry. We have thousands of pieces of physical trace evidence.
Yes, you do.
We
yes.
have physiological evidence. A lot of this has been analyzed. We have radar evidence, photographic evidence, a massive amount of evidence, but it needs to be looked at by an interdisciplinary team. Take the 1952 Washington, D.C. Evidence, for example. We had blips on the radar screen. We had a radar operator with 30 years experience who was highly knowledgeable about temperature inversion angels on the screen caused by temperature inversion. But in that case, we also had military pilots who were scrambled, who had visual sighting of these craft. We had people on the ground who had visual sightings with these craft. When it came down to the scientific analysis, these things were picked apart. The human beings were said to have possibly had perceptual errors, and the blips on the radar screen were said to be caused probably by inversions, even though the radar operator was seeing inversions every night of the week. No one ever put all of those pieces of evidence together and studied it the way that we would do a forensic investigation. And that's what I think we really need to do. We can't just separate into little parcels different pieces of information and not consider it as the whole.
I have one question for you about the evidence, and it's very particular type of question, and I am separating something out, but I've read you speaking of or writing of magnetic evidence with cars and Barney Hill's car having a magnetic field. How many of these magnetic fields are what is known as monopole magnetic fields, and how many are, just magnetic fields that we see elsewhere?
What I can tell you is on Barney Hill's car, there were shiny spots, and when he placed a compass, and Betty as well, placed a compass over those spots, the needle would spin and spin. They were on the trunk of the car. It wasn't up near the battery. This also happened in the case of Matthew Reed, case that happened in 2009 in Indiana, where he had dropped off a coworker, was returning home on a back road, driving along suddenly he finds himself in a new location. Hours have passed. His shoes are muddy. This case was investigated by MUFON's STAR team, and they did record evidence of a magnetic field, again, around the trunk of the car that the needle on the compass would spin. And there was no conventional reason why that should have occurred.
I think it also occurred in something in New Jersey, on the New Jersey-Pennsylvania border, with a sighting and a car that was affected. The entire car was affected with this unusual monopole magnetic field. I don't know if you know about that, but I guess it's just such a small detail, but yet to me somehow fascinating.
I would like to hear all of the cases that I can possibly hear about this, because I find this fascinating, and I'm wondering if that is in association with the car being lifted into the air, or why that magnetic field is there. We don't have the answer.
Well, I hope some young physicist who's entering a PhD program hears this and says, what's that all about? And gets interested in it. I think that's what you need too, and I think that's what you're getting at.
I think that Ken Pfeiffer probably has that case that I'm speaking of that happened up in Sussex County. I think he probably has access to that case. He's the MUFON coordinator here in New Jersey.
Okay, great, thank you.
So before we let you get on with your day, I wonder if you have anything that you would like to report to us, something that is ongoing now, a particularly interesting case that you have available to share with us, or anything like that.
I do not have an interesting case right now. Part of my frustration was that I've had two very, very interesting cases that I have worked on. They seemed like big cases. One of them has been ongoing. I've been investigating this case for 3 years. Finally, we were able to collect what was possibly an alien implant. It was removed by this man's surgeon and packaged up and sent to MUFON, and then sent to our scientists for evaluation. By the time it had arrived, it had dissolved. We've had this happen to 2 implants that I'm aware of.
Oh, boy.
Possible implants, let me say. Also, I had collected pink discoloration on this man's shirt. I had the photographs of it. After he had placed it in his closet in a paper bag in the dark for 2 weeks, he packaged it up. He sent it to me. I looked at it. By the time it arrived at the scientist's laboratory, there was not enough pink on it for analysis. So something is happening to the evidence, and that is terribly frustrating.
And your Aunt Betty Hill also had pink powder on her dress, if I recall.
That is correct, and that was my reason for asking experiencers to take part in this experiment, to see if we could find pink powder or create pink powder so that it could undergo laboratory analysis before it actually died, if in fact it is biological.
Interesting. But at any rate, I guess we have sort of come to the end, Kathleen, but please let us hear all about your books and your website and where people can go to join in if they have had an experience, where they can contact you so that they can share it with the other people who have also had experiences.
Okay, so
here we go.
My website is Kathleen with a K Marden MARDEN.com. In addition to my ordering the 3 books that I have had published, you can read articles that I have written that are absolutely free, and also my upcoming speaking engagements. are listed on my website. So please visit the website. If you have an experience that you wish to report, please go to MUFON's website and complete the experiencer questionnaire, which is separate from the experiencer survey. They're all on the main page at MUFON.com. One is 30 questions. That's the one you want to complete if you'd like to speak to a member of MUFON's experiencer research team and possibly make a report that would be where you would be interviewed by an investigator. The other one is the experiencer survey. And please, if you are an experiencer and you remember your experiences at all, please go there and fill that out. It's part of a really important scientific study that we're doing for the benefit of experiencers and also for the benefit of the public.
Yeah. And of course, your books, I love Captured. That you're right. That really, although obviously it was based on their abduction experience, it just brought Betty and Barney Hill to life. They were no longer just a couple who had been just abducted by some very strange beings, but and suddenly you realized why they had to be taken seriously. They were very important members of the community. And that was a great book, Captured. And then this newer one, Alien Abduction Files, is great too. But mostly, I'm looking forward to seeing the movie. I hope they get it done.
Me too. And thank you so much for being on Shattered Reality, Kathleen Marden.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you kid! It's really been great talking to you again. We'll have to get, maybe we can make it out to Phoenix. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be fun,
great.
right? Road trip.
Yeah.
Road trip.
That'd be some road trip.
I hope to see you there.
Okay. Take
Thanks
care
again.
now.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Before we go, I wanted to just state that today is January 19th,
Okay.
2016. We are Fahrusha.
And Kate Valentine.
Yes, and not only that, but this is free, and this is free reporting, free of any commercial interests, free internet. We have nothing to do with the mainstream media. We have no overlords as of yet, unless they're aliens, and we don't know it.
And if we hit on something really interesting, then we'll find out who the overlords are. But for right now, we haven't hit on anything terribly interesting.
So help support us at free and open internet, and like us at Shattered Reality Podcast on Facebook, which is our fan page on Facebook, and our two websites, which are shatteredrealitypodcast.com and shatteredrealitypodcast.wordpress.com. We're getting the shows out on YouTube. And I think that's about it for today. Oh, yes, don't forget, right, the experiencers. If you are an experiencer of paranormal phenomena, we had a woman with a bilocation experience last week, so it doesn't have to be aliens, paranormal phenomena experiencers, please let us know.
yes, anytime. We always love to hear from you, of course. So I guess that wraps up Shattered Reality for today. Kate Valentine saying au revoir.
And Fahrusha saying tschüss.
Okay.